Hey everyone, welcome back to another Marvel Monday with Bekah. There we go, Bekah and myself. I am Mac. We are going to take another deep dive into this most recent episode of WandaVision, the Halloween episode. As you can see, Bekah sporting her Doctor Strange Halloween costume.
And Eye of Agamotto. So I said that right, didn't I?
Yeah, the Eye of Agamotto. You got it. I just, am repeating WandaVision shirts at this point, but I'll never keep up with Bekah's outfits on this show. It's just never going to happen.
That's okay.
Before we do dive into WandaVision, we have some new Marvel must-haves to take a look at this week.
Yes, most of this is actually going to be, a sneak peek at stuff that's coming. But we've got a Pietro Maximoff pop as seen in this episode. Of course, we'll talk about that some more. But yeah, there's an exclusive Funko coming in March. And as you can see, he's holding the shaving cream and and then we also have, I think it should be in here, Billy and Tommy.
Yeah, these are awesome.
They're gonna have their own Funko Pop. Yeah, and I think they're bobbleheads, and they are going to be exclusive to the Emerald City Comic Con. So that's the pops. But then, and I kind of cover that again in the must-have roundup. Again, most of this stuff is what's coming soon. We've kind of looked at these already. There's the packaging, so that's pretty cool. And if I can close that, we also have these fig pins. These, I believe, are $20 a piece. So there's Wanda in red and then in the grayscale. These are also pre-order right now, and I think the collection, each one is limited to 1,000. And then
yeah, those are also really awesome.
Sorry, I love that it has a love like you're fine. A love like you've never seen. It says on the back of the wallet, and then the same thing with backpack. So it's pretty cool. I like the animation style of it, and I really like the TV waves, if you will. The like a broadcast. So, then stuff, of course, that's available now. So you can get these at Hot Topic. And well, look at that. That looks familiar.
Yeah, just a little bit.
So Hot Topic has several of these different iterations of the We Are an Unusual Couple shirt. So, or just Wanda. And then I'm going to scroll through really fast and get to this new pop socket. I think that's kind of fun. And then we have some drinkware that you can get through Amazon. So if you really like this retro version and the Halloween costumes, there's plenty of options for you to purchase.
Yeah, I really like those can bottles with Wanda and Vision individually on each one. Those are really cool.
Yeah, let me go back to that. Yeah, I can. There we go.
There we go.
So pretty cool. Oh, and I guess it says front and back, so I should have looked into this more, but it looks like you get both of them on the same
Gotcha.
cup. So pretty cool. And that's it for me.
Cool. So lots of new, exciting WandaVision merch available now or coming soon. But let's get into this past episode. What was your I guess an initial reaction to this episode as a whole?
I like Malcolm in the Middle. So I was very, very happy that we got a Malcolm in the Middle-esque episode. That was a lot of fun for me. I enjoyed this almost as much as last week's. I didn't. It just makes me question things more. I didn't feel like we got any answers.
Yeah, I totally agree. My thought on this episode was it actually was not my favorite. Not that I didn't like it. I definitely enjoyed every second of this episode. It was fantastic. But it didn't, like, the way that we left off the previous episode was such an amazing, huge moment. this one felt like it didn't really answer any questions, and it also didn't give us any new ones. It just kind of stretched things out, which is fine. And at this point in a season of any television show, you're going to get this sort of episode. It just kind of keeps fans guessing and wondering what's coming next. Makes perfect sense. I just, preferred some, like last week's episode where you got that huge, incredible moment right at the end. This one didn't quite give us that, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree.
So you mentioned, as we just dive into the episode here, you mentioned that you really like Malcolm in the Middle, and this intro felt very Malcolm in the Middle, as the intro and the theme song, really. So any thoughts on that as a fan of that sort of TV show?
I mean, they did it so well. Like, as soon as it started, and especially the when Wanda's brushing her teeth with her curlers in her hair, like that was very much Lois in Malcolm in the Middle. Yeah, you knew it was gonna kind of be a little bit more of a crazier episode, if you will. Like, there's gonna be a
Uh-oh, might have lost you for a second. I am going to share this comment here. Original Adventures says this episode was so much fun. Yep, totally agree. It was a crazy episode, a lot of fun things happening. I will say I was hoping for more like quintessential 90s stuff going on, I guess early 90s, because we jumped from the 80s to more or less the early 2000s with this mirroring Malcolm in the Middle a lot. And that show started in 2000. And I was kind of hoping for, I guess, like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and like maybe like some Friends and Seinfeld sort of thing. But still, it was a lot of fun, and I like that we're into the 2000s now and gonna get to some more familiar television shows for myself, anyway.
Well, and I think with the boys being the ages they are, around 10, maybe 11 in this episode, something like Malcolm in the Middle fits more than, say, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or, even Seinfeld. Like, yeah, I would love to see a 90s episode or a 90s show that we grew up with as this. But if you're doing more of a family sitcom, I can kind of understand why you'd focus on something a little bit more, not kid friendly. That's not the right word, but something that has
a family dynamic like that.
Right.
Yeah. Great point. That makes a lot of sense, actually. I do want to point out that during this intro, two things I thought were interesting. One was that they're going through, and it's really just the family. It's just the residents of the WandaVision home. And Agnes is featured in this. So they kind of play her up as a main character of this show, which I thought was interesting. Not that really developed anything new here in this episode, but I thought, interesting that they push her in that way. It also goes through and it just says, Billy, Tommy, Wanda, Vision. It says Pietro Maximoff as himself, which I thought was a funny little nod, like, pointing out the whole craziness that we dealt with last week with this not being our Pietro Maximoff, but a different version of the character. So I thought that was pretty cool. Building on that Malcolm in the Middle motif, Billy and Tommy open up the episode talking directly to the camera, like you would see Malcolm do. It's interesting. It's two different characters as opposed to just being Malcolm. But I guess you're not going to favor one twin over the other, right? They're both the main character here.
Right.
So I think pretty early on in this episode too, they also poke at, and I think this is the thing that Marvel does so well. And I'm not even entirely sure how they go about doing it. It might just be completely unintentional, but of course, fans are going to come up with theories on how everything, is going to play out. And they manage to sort of poke at those theories as, the show goes on. And I think one of the big theories was that Pietro isn't actually Pietro. He's a villain of some sort in disguise. And right in the beginning of this episode, Tommy makes fun of Billy for more or less being, afraid that Pietro is actually a vampire in disguise. And I think, that seems to me like that's just, playing off of those theories, at least poking fun at them, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we do get a look, as we alluded to a little bit earlier, at some of their comic-esque costumes You see Wanda in her Sokovian fortune teller costume that she had here, which of course is really just the Scarlet Witch comic accurate costume, which we got a peek at in the trailer. We've seen this image more or less quite 100 times by now for those of us who were, hanging on every piece of information that they released on WandaVision. But we did also see some other costumes for the first time, and that being Pietro and then Tommy in his Quicksilver-esque costume here. So I thought that was really interesting that they gave them their costumes as well. I don't have an image of Billy, but he also has a Wiccan, somewhat accurate costume of Wiccan from the comics. So I thought that was really, really cool as well. We don't fully get Tommy's Speed costume. He has a different look from Quicksilver. I'm sure we'll get that in the future. And that's probably the reason that I won't end up getting those two specific pop figures we saw a few minutes ago, because I'll have to hold out for the ones where they get their real costumes.
That makes sense.
So as they're talking about these costumes and reminiscing about Halloween a little bit, Pietro brings up a memory, and it's a funny little cutaway gag that, again, has, the Malcolm in the Middle sort of humor to it. But he plays out this scenario from when he and Wanda were children, and after it plays out, Wanda points out, that's not how she remembers it. So interesting that we are seeing now that they have different memories of their childhoods. Again, poking at the fact that this is not the Pietro that we know from the MCU. We also see, as I mentioned, Vision comes down in his comic accurate costume, and he points out that he seems to be a lot more relaxed about the whole situation. Last we saw him, he was very close to really. I mean, he did confront Wanda, and it seemed as though they were almost going to start fighting, like actually physically fighting. And he seems to be more calmed down, more relaxed right now, but also throws a few jabs in there. Like he points out, his costume was the only clothes he had in his closet, as if, of course, Wanda is controlling that. And also before he leaves to go do his neighborhood watch duties that he, may or may not have, he tells Wanda to be good, and, does so in a very telling way, basically saying, I know what's going on here. We all know what's going on here. So, be good.
Yeah, very different from coming from him too. Like we haven't, like you said, we haven't seen this side of Vision. Who, now he's like kind of with it, but also, sorry, it's interesting too how cute they were as a couple in the very beginning of the series, and then slowly it's very clear that he doesn't trust her quite the same, and she seems to not want to question too much because then she knows it's going to drive him further away. I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely an interesting dynamic that they're not fully, approaching right now. They're kind of sweeping it under the rug, and as you would normally see in a family sitcom, that kind of story just kind of gets brushed aside. I do want to address this comment here. Won't the kids die outside of the hex? We don't know for sure right now, I guess. We do see some stuff with Vision that we'll get into a little bit later, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, who knows? I have a feeling there's some dark stuff coming in this show as we get later in the season. So we jump outside of the hex and we see Director Hayward dealing with Monica and Wu and Darcy. And as they basically confront him over the whole situation from last week's episode where he sent in a drone to launch a missile at Wanda, which clearly did not work very well for him. It doesn't take long. He immediately just kicks the three of them out of the S.w.o.r.d base, has some agents escort them out. And something's going to change. Something's going to happen when just some nameless agents start escorting the heroes out. These guys aren't going to put up much of a fight. And that plays out as you would expect, as the three of them manage to break free and hide somewhere on the S.w.o.r.d facility. And as they're leaving, Monica points out Hayward is up to something. And we've said right from the beginning with this guy, we don't trust him. There's something about him. We speculated maybe he's a Skrull, maybe he's Hydra, and S.w.o.r.d had been infiltrated like S.h.i.E.L.D. was. Lots of different theories. I do have a new theory on this guy, and I will get into it a little bit later, but we have some other things to play out beforehand.
Okay. Sounds exciting.
So back in the Hex, Pietro, Wanda, and the kids are out trick-or-treating, and Pietro refers to the kids as demon spawn, which is, on the surface, just a really funny little line. Pietro being quote unquote a man-child, as Billy refers to him, is more or less the comic relief of this episode. And this line, I think, though, was interesting for a few reasons. We talked about how there's the theory that Pietro is actually a villain in disguise, and one of the popular fan theories for a long time has been Mephisto being a demon, potentially referencing that right on the nose right there. But another theory is Nightmare. And I want to point out here, this costume, as you can see over in the side here, this sort of, which I love that they threw this in there on a Halloween episode. They have this like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees mashup costume. So thought that was really fun. But maybe more to that, because another theory is that Nightmare is the villain. And Nightmare more or less has a similar power set to the slasher villain Freddy Krueger. So, just another little subtle nod thrown in there. I really like how they managed to play at these theories. And again, probably unintentional. They're just throwing details in, and fans like us are gonna take it and run with it. So, really enjoyed that they included that costume in there.
Yeah, I didn't even catch that. So I'm really glad you have that screenshot and pointed that out.
It's actually pretty funny if you go back and watch this part. As soon as Pietro yells and the kids run off, he turns, as you can see, looks right at Pietro, and sort of like, it seems to me like he realizes they're not talking to him, so he just turns away and goes back about his business. It's pretty funny.
I will go and look for that.
So right off of this, that line there, Wanda immediately starts testing Pietro, asking him questions about their childhood, seeing what he remembers, and he never really answers the questions. He actually just points out that she's testing him. And it's interesting. Clearly, she doesn't fully seem to trust him. There's something off about him. She wonders why he looks different. And I mean, as we all do right now still, we have no idea why this is Evan Peters and not Aaron Taylor Johnson. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, clearly Wanda is just as curious as we are. There's also a funny little line thrown in here that I'm not gonna repeat that one right now. But if you they reference a movie that stars Evan Peters and Aaron Taylor Johnson, and you can check out the newest episode of Zacks of Life, the Zacks of Life podcast, which just went up today, and we get into that a little bit more. So right after that, Wanda goes and talks to another neighbor, and this is Herb, who we've seen in almost every episode prior to this, in his Frankenstein's monster costume, which we were talking a little bit beforehand about how like the costumes mean something relating to the comics. I wonder if Herb, and this is just completely spitballing on the fly here, I wonder if Herb is sort of an amalgamation of different characters, and they actually literally piece together this character, and Frankenstein's monster costume, fits that theory there. I don't know. That would be interesting. Herb doesn't.
I was thinking the same thing. I know there'll be more to get to later on, but the characters we focus on who are in costumes are in very specific costumes. So yes, I think I'm on the exact same track.
Yeah, and Herb doesn't stand out as any specific character to me. Again, I mean, we've talked about maybe Agnes is Agatha Harkness, Quicksilver might be Mephisto. He could be anybody in disguise, right? And on that note, actually, this is just unrelated kind of, but we haven't seen Dottie in a while. Just going to throw that out there.
Seems I know. I was thinking I was thinking about that too. And I think from trailer footage that we've seen, there's more, or at least one more appearance from her. I don't know. But yes, she hasn't been around at all. So very intrigued by that.
Yeah, I want to point out a comment real quick. We have the theory here that Mephisto is too big a villain to appear on a TV series. Normally, prior to this, I would have agreed with that, but I think they're really going to push these series to be these big MCU events. I don't think they're going to differentiate in those terms from the movies. So I think we could be fair game. I wrong. We'll have to see how WandaVision plays out, and then Falcon and Winter Soldier and the other series going. That could be the case. So we also see then, after they move away from Herb, after the trick-or-treating scene there, Vision is off on his own little adventure here, trying to find more information on what's going on with Westview. And he sees this neighbor, and it's kind of hard to see in this image here. She's well, obviously it's hard to see that she is repeating the same motions over and over again. As we've seen in the trailer, there's clearly something wrong. It's almost like a glitch in the programming. And she's actually crying. There's a single tear going down her face. So this is the first we've seen of a neighbor sort of breaking through the mind control without Vision's help, at least, and showing that they're not happy. And that's probably because, again, these are the neighbors farther on the outskirts of town, and they are not being used. They're not in speaking roles, more or less. They're just kind of standing there taking up space, and I guess they can really feel what they're going through. So that was an interesting little scene to throw in there. That brings us to one of the strangest moments of this episode and this series as a whole. We've been seeing those ads interrupting each episode, these very strange commercials, and this was the strangest one. This was for Yo Magic, a brand of yogurt, and features a little boy trapped on an island and complaining about being hungry, and then a shark brings him some yogurt. What are your thoughts on this commercial? Do you have any idea what they're trying to say here?
Well, everyone we've seen so far has kind of been it seems like it's been part of Wanda's history or her origin story. And this to me doesn't feel, and I could be wrong, but this doesn't feel like a reference to the past. It feels like it's referencing the present. Yeah, I'm thrown by this. I'm going in a bunch of different directions. My first instinct was that, okay, well, she's surviving, like she's not consuming, but she's surviving by using her magic powers. But I don't know. Also, then the kid can't open the container. So what good is Yo Magic if you can't open it? So is it that just a reference to this isn't going to sustain you for a long time? Or completely going out there, maybe the island is the safe place and Wanda can't leave. That shark doesn't offer to take her or take the kid away. I know I'm reading way too much into this, but like,
no, it makes sense.
Is she kind of let's say the kid is her. Is this person trapped on the island and can't get off of it because shark infested waters? They're not going to consume her, but they're not going to let her. Something powerful is not going to consume her, but it's not going to let her go get away from the island. I don't know. What about you?
Well, first, I like it that you thought way more into it than I did. First, I have to point out, did you know that Go-Gurt is just yogurt? Yes.
Thanks, Troy.
Yeah, my thought was sticking with the theme of the ads. This does go back to Wanda's past a little bit again and points out. And the reason I thought of this is because if you go back to the post-credit scene of, I want to say Captain America Winter Soldier is when we first see Wanda and Pietro. The Hydra agent with Baron von Strucker asks about what to do with the survivors. And the tagline for this is a snack for survivors. So, and it's, magic. She survived Hydra's experiments, and magic was what she got out of it. So that was my much simpler thought than what you came up with for sure. Also, a commercial featuring packaging that's too hard to open so you die, probably not the best marketing campaign.
Right?
I mean, I don't know. It doesn't make me want to buy Yo Magic.
Yeah, like why wouldn't the shark like, you know, rip it, like get it ripped open for the kid, you know?
Oh, this is another interesting thought here. What if maybe the child is Vision and he can't survive without Wanda's magic? So, I mean, that's another thought as we see later on in the episode.
I like that.
Yeah. Coming back into the episode now, just a nice little Easter egg sort of thing here. It's hard to even call this an Easter egg because it's so blatantly in your face for a solid 3 or 4 seconds. But the movies at the theater are The Incredibles and The Parent Trap, which this is where I was like, I got the Malcolm in the Middle connection, but off the top of my head as I was watching it, I didn't think of when Malcolm in the Middle came out. So I was still thinking this episode is in the 90s. And then I saw The Incredibles and I was like, that was not in the 90s. So I guess we are not. We are into the 2000s now. So that was what it meant for me there. But also, 2 movies that make sense with what's happening in this show right now. This is The Incredibles, a movie about a superpowered family, and then The Parent Trap, a movie dealing primarily with twins, which is what's happening in the show now. So I thought that was an interesting little nod. And again, a nod that is pretty much looking at you directly and nodding for a good several seconds. So Wanda and Pietro sort of start arguing a little bit, and Pietro says that he is just trying to do his part, seemingly aware that he is in a television show. I mean, literally saying he's just playing his role. And then gets into his memories a little bit, and he says he remembers being shot. So shot in the street specifically, like we saw in Age of Ultron, which is interesting because, you know, we were dealing with the flashback before and thought maybe he had different memories, but now he does remember being shot, and killed in Age of Ultron. So although he doesn't specifically mention Ultron, interesting.
True.
He does say that the next thing he remembers is her calling for him and feeling like she needed him, and that's when he came back. And I thought that is a nice nod to a story from the comics in which Wanda is calling out for help and subconsciously brings Simon Williams, aka Wonder Man, back from the dead. So I thought that was a pretty cool little mention in there as well. We then shortly after that, we see that Tommy has his powers. He realizes that he has super speed. Obviously, Pietro is very excited about that. I think he says chip off the old Maximoff block. So very cool to see another Marvel character, fully reach their abilities and become this. I mean, he hasn't gotten the name or the costume yet, but he is the, superhero that he is in the comics. So we now have speed in the MCU, at least for now. Again, I think some dark stuff is around the corner for them, but we'll see.
It's also interesting how Wanda, at least for me, it felt like she was trying to give the boys more freedom to do stuff. Like she's not trying to completely control them, as maybe if she has as much control as we're led to believe. It's just interesting seeing her kind of go through that parental, quintessential parental experience where you're like, I have to let my kids go. I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
or
no, definitely.
Maybe it's just because she can't control them, so she's trying to not stress over it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen how Wanda deals with stress, so I mean, we'll see what happens there. Going back to the commercial. What about the boy on the island being Billy or Tommy? Again, can't survive without Wanda's magic. At least we think. We'll have to see how things play out. But seems like that could be the case.
That's an interesting observation. I like that too.
So before the boys leave, Wanda does tell them, she reminds them, because they have clearly been told this before, don't go past Ellis Avenue. And in that moment, doesn't really mean anything to us, except for the fact that that's probably the end of Westview, right? She doesn't want them leaving the town because who knows what would happen to them. Back outside the Hex, we see Darcy, Monica, and Wu digging for information as Darcy kind of hilariously hacks through S.w.o.r.D's computers in a matter of seconds, and starts finding some information on Hayward and the fact that Hayward has had a way to see into the hex and is actually tracking Vision, which I also find very interesting as far as my theory on this character. And again, one more point on him later on, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, so they see that they're tracking Vision, and they see that Vision is approaching the edge of town as he gets to more unique neighbors, I guess, with them being less and less active as he gets to the edge of town. And then eventually finds Agnes parked in a car and seemingly sort of frozen. Like she can answer, she talks to him, but something very off about her in this moment here. And then he eventually unfreezes her. And this is the moment we get in the trailer, again, that we've seen 100 times by now, where she asks him, "Am I dead?" And when he asks why she would ask that, she says, "Because you are." And this is the first moment where Vision is learning. I mean, Wanda previously told him, you don't want to go back to outside Westview. That's not, that wouldn't be good for you. But he hasn't heard to this point that he is dead. She also points out that he's an Avenger, and he doesn't remember the Avengers, which I thought was interesting. He had dealt with some memory loss on things before, but something as big as being a member of the Avengers or the existence of the Avengers in general, that was interesting that he doesn't remember that at all. Agnes also says that Vision says that he's going to help get them out of there, and she points out, or she says actually, no one. She asks him how he's going to do it. No one leaves. Wanda won't even let us think about it. All is lost. And going back to last week, we saw when Norm was freed from the mind control, he started freaking out, and he kept saying she has us under control. I forget his exact words, but he kept saying she. Never actually said Wanda. This is the first time somebody's been freed from the mind control and actually said Wanda. So we do know now Wanda is at least the one controlling these people. And obviously they're not happy about it. They want to break free of this control. So yeah, I thought that was interesting that that's the first mention of that right there. Any other thoughts on Agnes and her role in this? Because we talked about this character a lot. We've had a lot of theories about her, and this it threw me for a loop at least.
So I'm just anticipating, thinking as I'm watching this that she's acting. There's some other level to this. She's gonna make Vision believe what she needs him to believe in order to keep up whatever it is they're doing. That's my first instinct. But also, she seems more like lucid or together. If she's as far from town as, or far from the center of where everything's taking place, how did she get over there? And then why is she still able to communicate as well as she does? She was able to respond to him right away, and the other neighbors didn't say. Like he was calling to them, and there no movement whatsoever. I don't know. I think there's something fishy about this, but
yeah, I agree. This like I said, threw me for a loop at first, but it definitely does seem like there's still something special about her, right? Like there's, because like you said, the other neighbors in that area can't respond, they can't move, they can't do anything, but Agnes still can, and so I think there's definitely something about this character. She's going to be more than what we see, what we've seen so far.
She's also in a car. Like, she's driving a car.
Yeah, and she got herself there, right? Like,
I would assume so.
Yeah, and the other characters would have been there since the beginning of all of this. Or I guess, I don't know, because I guess they're there out trick-or-treating. I don't know, maybe Wanda is moving them. I'm not sure. So we'll see. I think there's something special about Agnes still. What that is, who knows? We'll have to wait and find out, because again, so many different possibilities. Back outside the Hex, we rejoin Monica and Wu and Darcy, and Monica says that her guy will be there in an hour. So we talked last week about the aerospace engineer that she mentioned, who can help with their vehicle that they need to get into the hex. And we talked a little bit about the theory that the translation, I believe it was in Spanish, was feminine. So we thought maybe it was a female aerospace engineer. Now she says her guy. Again, that could just be, this could still be anything. One popular theory for who it might be was the Skrull girl that she met in Captain Marvel. And if she was to show up in a disguise, she could very well show up as a man, but could still be the female character that we were talking about. So, I mean, still, like I said in the beginning of this didn't really give us any answers. It didn't really give us any new questions. It stretched out the questions that we were already pondering. And I mean, I guess threw us in some different directions on those, but didn't really give us any answers. Do you have a thought? Do you have a leading theory as far as who that might be?
I don't. I listened to this one podcast, and they keep talking about maybe there being some, shocking cameo, and is this going to be Reed Richards, John Krasinski? I don't think Marvel's going to go that big this quickly. We know there's a movie because we don't even have a date for that yet. We have dates for so many other movies. So I don't think they're going to bring in or make share that casting choice this early on. But other than that, I have no idea. Yeah, no,
I totally agree. Again, Reed Richards is the popular theory, but I would be very surprised to see him appear in this series. One more point on what's going on outside the hex before we jump back into it. Monica says that she's going to be going back into the hex, and Darcy tells her she can't. She's looking up the blood work and all of the tests that S.w.o.r.d ran on her, and that the hex has been altering her cells. And that's just another, again, pointing towards the fact that she will eventually become a superpowered individual with similar powers to Captain Marvel, as she actually has the Captain Marvel title in the comics for a stretch. She could go by Spectrum. She could go by Pulsar. Lots of different names that we could see her. But she's going to be a super-powered character in the future. Back inside the Hex, we rejoin Pietro and Wanda. And Pietro starts to ask her questions about everything that's going on. He asks her, where were the kids up to this point? He asks her how this all started. He points out that this was a huge jump from what her powers were before. He says, it's a pretty big leap from giving people nightmares and shooting red wiggly woods out of your hands, which obviously, yes, I totally agree. This is a big leap from what we've seen from Wanda in the MCU, aside from the fact that she overpowered Thanos for a few seconds. Wanda then tells him she doesn't know. She doesn't remember how this all started. So again, seems to me like there is some sort of antagonist coming up in the future. And the theme song, actually, to go back to the beginning, the theme song actually points out, or I think the final lyric is something along the lines of, you never know who will show up to play, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I do think this exchange between them is very, I feel like she's being honest with him, but maybe not. I just know from, I have 4 siblings, so there's some things that you can tell your siblings that you just can't tell other people. So I can see where she would be comfortable, even if she's not quite sure who he is. She's comfortable enough to tell him, she doesn't know how this started, and trust that he's gonna believe her. And then they even go on. He talks about, or she says, "Oh, you don't think this is wrong?" And he tells her, "Oh, I'm impressed. How did you do all this?" So that's something that I think, you would have from a sibling, probably especially a twin, who would be like, "No, I'm impressed with what your powers are, what you're able to do," instead of maybe saying like, "You got to stop."
Right. And he even points out that Wanda was always the empathetic twin too. So of the two of them, you would think Pietro would be the one to do something like this. But so obviously he's going to approve of what Wanda has done here. Just jump back a little bit here. Another interesting theory. that Agnes was trying to escape the hex in her car. I totally agree, and we actually have some thoughts on that we'll get into in a little bit as well. But Wanda's chat with Pietro doesn't stay happy for all that long, as she, similar to a moment in a previous episode, gets a glimpse of Pietro after he was killed, which is, again, interesting. He remembers being shot, but this Pietro wasn't shot in that situation. So they didn't bring back Aaron Taylor-Johnson for one zombie-esque shot here. It is still Evan Peters. So yeah, interesting that we see this character in this way.
Yeah, and this comment she sees him like this right after she tells him she remembers feeling completely alone, empty, and endless nothingness. And then she sees her dead brother.
Right, yeah. Which I would have to go back and watch what she was saying right before she saw Vision. I think that was just she was telling Vision that Monica had to leave, or Geraldine had to leave at that point. So no real connection there, but maybe I'll revisit that and see if there was any other little nods to that as well. Back outside the Hex, one more, well, I guess there are a few more times that we're going to be there. Darcy digs up some information on a S.w.o.r.d computer and finds this file that is labeled as for Hayward's eyes only. And I thought the name of this was pretty interesting. It's Cataract is the name of the project here, and classified weapons intel. So Cataract, as she's clearly looking for information on Vision. And I think it's kind of funny that Cataract is the name of the project, dealing with Vision, being something that obscures Vision. And I've pointed out before that I think Hayward was doing something with Vision. He was probably trying to create a weapon using Vision. So I think I'm taking it a step farther here. I think Hayward is so desperate to get Vision back, and who would be that desperate to get Vision back other than the person who made him, talking about Ultron. So maybe Hayward is a sort of an LMD of being controlled by Ultron, or he's being coerced to do this by Ultron. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Ultron be that potential big, cameo that shows up in this series, and maybe we get the return of a giant MCU villain for the future.
I really like that, and it makes sense because that he would want Wanda out, like, at whatever cost he wants to get rid of her. She's the one who killed Ultron ultimately, so he had given her so much. In Age of Ultron, he had promised her and Pietro so much for helping to destroy the Avengers, and then she of course switched teams and then ended up being part of his demise. Or maybe she didn't ultimately kill him, but she ripped his heart out, or she ripped out
his heart. So some piece that would be where the heart is.
So yeah, I could see. I actually really like that.
Couple of comments I want to point out. Somebody's thinking the same way as me right here. And then Cataract potentially being a clone of Vision. Yeah, that could be like he would have to recover Vision's body to create a new Vision, more or less. So, and Vision, the name came from being Ultron's vision of the future. So that's another connection there, that he would maybe want to recover Vision's body. Also, another little Easter egg that they dropped in Avengers: Age of Ultron, when Tony, after Jarvis more or less became Vision, when Tony is going through new AIs to handle everything in his suit and chooses Friday, one of the other names is Jocasta, which is another Ultron-esque. It's actually Ultron's wife in some ways in the comics. So it seems like pieces are laid out for a return of Ultron in the future of the MCU.
I'm actually kind of excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just a sort of a crazy theory. I hope this plays out, but there are a lot of things that I hope play out. Only one or two of them can happen, so we'll have to wait and see. So Darcy's research is interrupted by Vision breaching the hex and coming out to the S.w.o.r.d base. I almost said shield again. I got to get shield out and S.w.o.r.d in. You know, like that's what I have to. Where the MCU is moving, I have to stick with that.
Yeah, but you have like 12 years of shield, and
yeah.
just what 6 weeks of 5 weeks of S.w.o.r.d.
I need some deprogramming for sure. We see Vision escaping, kind of trying to escape the hex and sort of getting pulled back in. And you had a funny observation about this that I think kind of shows up pretty well in this this image here.
Yes, Edna mode, and we see the marquee says the Incredibles, no capes, right? Isn't her issue with superheroes and capes is that it could be harmful to them? So here we go. He's got a cape.
Yeah, he's the cape getting sucked back into the hex. I mean, obviously he is as a whole, but the cape is, you know, not helping, and he's a character that can just make, you know, parts of him just kind of phase away. So you just get rid of the cape. As Vision is trying to get away and the hex is pulling him back in, he is screaming in pain as it reminded me a lot of when characters were getting dusted in the snap at the end of Infinity War. It kind of looked like that as he was getting pulled piece by piece back into the hex. And back inside, Billy, being with the fact that he's nowhere near him, can still hear Vision's screams. And this is the moment where he is sort of realizing his powers. He doesn't fully realize his powers because in the comics, at least, Wiccan is a pretty heavy hitter. Being the son of the Scarlet Witch, he's going to have some serious magical abilities. Who knows how that plays out in the MCU in the future, but so he at least gets a fraction of his powers here as he hears Vision and then also stops Tommy in his tracks using magic. And Tommy is kind of blown away, gets excited about it, but Billy quickly moves away and starts running, looking for Wanda to try and, you know, let her know that Vision is in trouble. Wanda obviously, you know, reacts and is panicked, and Pietro quickly responds or just tells her, it's not like your dead husband can die twice. And obviously that's a problematic line for multiple reasons. She can't have the kids hearing that Vision has died before. She can't have anybody hearing that Vision has died. And she immediately, you know, magics him away. She throws her red wiggly woos at him and flings him into some hay. Another thing I noticed, though, and I guess this could be explained in a lot of different ways, but how would Pietro know that Vision had died? Pietro died long before Vision did. And the next thing he knew, she was calling to him and he showed up at the house. He shouldn't know that Vision is dead. So again, points at something weird going on with Pietro.
Yeah, I don't have any wisdom to add to that, but I think you bring up a really good point. That's a very interesting question. And Pietro didn't even seem to know who Vision was in the last episode. He's like, hey, who's the popsicle? Like, he had no idea who this guy is. And then, all of a sudden, like,
that takes it even a step further, really. And another thought on that too is, so like I said, Wanda immediately reacts and throws Pietro away. That, you know, could be for the reasons I laid out before. It also could be that she immediately recognizes, you know, Pietro doesn't know that. And this is not Pietro. So maybe something's wrong there. And we could see her approach that situation at the very beginning of that episode. So of the next episode, I should say. We'll see. But that, you know, just another thought on pointing towards Pietro not really being Pietro.
Mm-hmm.
So Wanda's response to save Vision is to expand the hex, which, again, you know, she pointed out that she doesn't remember how this began. She doesn't know how she did it. And yet here she is, you know, on a whim, making this bubble even bigger. So clearly she has some understanding of how this is all working. And so she expands the hex a pretty great deal too, as we see it moving for quite a while, and expands past where Vision seemingly fell on the ground and died. You would think that being back inside this magic bubble, he's going to be completely fine. but he's not the only one that gets brought inside the hex. Darcy, who tried to rush to his aid and was caught by S.w.o.r.d, she gets left behind. She gets sucked into the hex. Most of S.w.o.r.d gets sucked into the hex. And they pretty hilariously immediately become clowns, kind of just pointing, that they were clowns the whole time. And S.w.o.r.d, the S.w.o.r.d facility here becomes a circus. And we see Monica and Wu getting away in their vehicle. They seem to be, at a safe distance. And then we also see Hayward and some other nameless S.w.o.r.d agents get away. We think, at least, get away from the expanding hex. So we'll have to see. I'm very interested to see Darcy inside the hex and what that does to that character.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well.
Given that...
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to be totally random and silly. Maybe the next episode is American Horror Story Freak Show. Isn't Evan Peters in that anthology series? So we're just setting that up, and it's a Fox property. No, I'm just sorry for the little tangent.
No, it's funny because I was going to say a very similar thing, being that Kat Dennings has already been in a sitcom. Maybe she just becomes her character in Two Broke Girls, because we're going to be moving into the 2010s now, right? So
there you go.
No, that's her hex look. So yeah, we'll have to see, how that impacts that character, what goes on with this circus at the S.w.o.r.d, the former S.w.o.r.d facility. But interesting. And then the episode just ends with Wanda with a red glow in her eyes, and then just stops moving the hex, and that's it. It just cuts. And then this was, I think, to me, not that it was abrupt, but it was the ending where I more than any other episode was just like, that can't be it. That is not the ending of this episode. I definitely thought there would be more. And people have been joking online about how the biggest villain in the MCU right now is just that please stand by screen that comes up to end every episode. So
I know. I will say they've totally mastered the leave them wanting more. I've not gotten to a point with this where I'm like, I didn't need that. I'm like, no, keep going.
Couple of comments here. Have you all seen Darcy's Inside the Bubble look? Yeah, they did release a poster today, I think. It was either today or late yesterday, of the Darcy's character in what we think would be what she's going to look like inside the hex. And then, wouldn't Darcy tell Vision everything now that she's inside the hex? Well, you would think that she will be under that same control that all the other characters have been, like when Monica became Geraldine. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But that would be my guess. We talked a lot about Pietro potentially being possessed, more or less. Or this could be a character in disguise, but maybe it is, given the characters that we're talking about being the villains, like Mephisto and Nightmare, this could be somebody possessing Pietro's body. And then we talked about how Agnes was a little bit different in this episode. Is it possible that maybe this entity, whatever this villain might be, left Agnes to become Pietro, and that's why Agnes immediately tried to leave the hex?
Yeah, I'd heard similar, something like that on the podcast, and I think that's very interesting, and it would explain why. I mean, it might explain why. Why she's trying to get away. Is she's now able to, maybe not able to, but she has a few moments where she's free to do what she needs to, while whatever was possessing her is distracted by doing something else. I think that.
Yeah, and again, we still think there's something different about Agnes, and we thought so prior to this, what happened where she may or may not have been trying to escape. And so she seemingly might have the ability to break that mind control at least a little bit for long enough for her to drive to that corner of Ellis Ave there. We'll see. Again, lots of theories on Agnes, as definitely something off about her.
Mm-hmm.
Also, want to ask you, I think I asked you a little while ago, but this Skywalker level cameo, this Luke Skywalker level cameo, is supposed to be coming. What do we think? I mean, we've talked about Reed Richards, Ultron. Any other strong guesses? Anybody else you might think?
Well, they've kept this under wraps, and I'm just thinking the easiest way to get a cameo of a big character into the MCU is someone who's already been in the MCU. So, I mean, I don't know why I think this, but I'm wondering if Loki is going to appear. I think that would be interesting. We know he's a fan favorite villain. We also know that he had the Tesseract at the end of, or in the middle of Endgame. So we know that there's a version of Loki that isn't dead, and he's probably not nearly as reformed as he was in Infinity War. So I'm just wondering if he's going to show up. How about you?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, given what this Loki series is going to be about, and him more or less jumping through time and space and realities, it's very possible that he shows up here. I don't think he would be the character that is pulling the strings on all of this,
No,
but I would
agree.
be shocked to see him be involved in some way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think Paul Bettany said that he has like fireworks with this character, or at least with a person who's in here. So I'm thinking who would Vision have, who would he take issue with? Unless once he's back in the Hex now, his whole mind changes and he's pro whatever Wanda's doing. But yeah, who would he find as a character that, you know, he might want to put a stop to?
Yeah, another interesting theory right here. Doctor Strange coming up in the finale. We know that Wanda is going to be in the Doctor Strange sequel, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So that makes a lot of sense. We could see him show up. The fact that Paul Bettany said it was an actor he hasn't worked with previously pokes a hole in this, I think. But Aaron Taylor Johnson showing up wouldn't be crazy. I think we maybe see the real Pietro come back in some way. So that could be it. I obviously also think Ultron is on the table as an option. And of course, I mean, we agreed that Reed Richards would be kind of a big shock. We don't think Marvel is going to go that big with this, but you know, anything seems possible right now. I also still think the Skrull child from Captain Marvel could be this could set up, given Monica's big involvement, could set up the Secret Invasion series we're getting in the future.
Yeah, there's so much. I've heard so many little theories about, oh, we might have this person, we might have that person, this could set up this. I mean, basically everything that we've seen in WandaVision could almost tie to all of the other series and not movies, but all of the other series that have been announced for Disney Plus. It to some extent. And I don't know that all of that's going to be packed into this series, but it is fun to kind of think about, oh, hey, there's could possibly be a connection leading to whatever.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to whittle it down, right? Like you said, there's so much coming up, and this could connect to, it's going to connect more or less, but this could lead to a bunch of different projects. And the theory is right now for all of them. And it's just coming down to picking which one it's actually going to be. So, but any other thoughts on this episode, or anything on WandaVision as a whole before we wrap up?
I was just going to say another cameo, Ron Swanson. I mean, Nick Offerman, he keeps showing up and stuff, right? Like, why not get him into this?
You know what? I don't care how they do it, but get me Nick Offerman in the MCU, just any character, even if it is just a cameo of some sort. You know what? I'm going to say it. Nick Offerman for Reed Richards. Do it.
Oh,
put it out there.
Okay. I'm on board. No, I think that's it for me for this episode.
Yeah, that's going to do it for us for Marvel Monday here. We'll be back next week to talk about another episode of WandaVision coming down. We only got 3 episodes left. So hopefully we start getting some, I mean, we've already had craziness happen, but it's going to get even crazier. And like I said, potentially even darker. We'll see. But definitely excited to get back into another episode next week. As for today, we have Parks Talk Live at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And then tonight we have the Laughing Place Movie Club with a special movie club tonight. We're actually talking about a TV series that's Dinosaurs, which is now streaming on Disney Plus, and that will be at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. As for more Marvel stuff, if you are interested in Marvel Comics and everything that's going on there, you can join Benji and myself on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time for Marvel Time, as we'll talk about, I'm sure there's more King in Black comics coming out this week, which has been incredibly fun. And then another episode of the Zacks of Life podcast just came out today. Bekah actually joined Kyle and myself on this episode, and we drafted a Marvel Mount Rushmore. So go check that out wherever you listen to your podcast. But aside from that, we will see you next week. Thanks, Bekah.
Thank you, Mack.
Bye, everyone.